Tell me what you guys thought about the Justice League down below in the comments section. Now let's talk about the movie. Hey there guys, how are you? So Justice League, probably my most anticipated movie of 2017, and ever since I was a stupid little kid, rewatching Batman 1989 on VHS over and over until the point where our VCR actually ate the tape and it destroyed it, and my parents got very angry at me. This is a movie I've waited my entire life to finally see up on the big screen. And before we dive into Justice, I wanted to let you know that this video is brought to you by Stardust. Stardust is the place where I post my first reactions to TV shows or movies, so if you guys want my first reactions, definitely follow the Flick Pick on Stardust. If you guys like movies or TV shows and you like to watch people's first reactions or post your own reactions, well, Stardust is the best place to do so. It's like social media, but just for movies without all the other stupid crap of people taking pictures of their food. This movie stars badass Ben the Batflick and the rest of the Justice League. Now, since I've been doing YouTube reviews about movies for years now, I can predict the comment section down below, and let me get a few things out of the way very quickly. I'm not a DC fanboy, I'm not a Marvel fanboy, I'm just a fanboy of quality, compelling movies that contain great stories and good characters that you want to buy on Blu-ray and watch over and over again throughout the year at 3 o'clock in the morning while eating frozen pizza and wearing nothing but your underwear. That's what I like. So throughout this review, if I have any criticisms with the characters or the movie itself, it's not because I don't like DC. I love DC. I want to love this movie. Look, here's this. Sometimes I sleep with this at night. And I even own this right here. Don't judge me. Okay, since we got all that out of the way, let's finally talk about the movie. This film is credited as a Zack Snyder film. Now, love or hate Zack Snyder, he really set the tone for the DC universe of films with Man of Steel. And when it comes to Man of Steel, I've always really enjoyed that movie. I remember seeing it 5 times in the theater. I bought the Blu-ray on day number 1, and for me, it was the Superman story I've always wanted to see. And when it comes to the DC universe of films, I still think it's the most cohesive and compelling story yet in the universe. And due to some life tragedies, this movie also had another director step in to help it out with a lot of reshoots and some rewrites, and that director was Joss Whedon, who also directed the Avengers films. And you can go on the internet and debate back and forth about how much of this film Joss Whedon actually did direct. Was it 20%? Was it 10%? Was it 30%? In my opinion, it felt like Joss Whedon did a lot in this movie, because a lot of this movie does feel like a Zack Snyder film, but at other times, it feels very much like a Joss Whedon film in the sense and style and tone of other films that he's directed, like The Avengers, for example. Now, from a straight-up directing and visual style, The Justice League is a very different looking film in comparison to Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. Because in both of those previous films, the color grading is desaturated at times, there's a lot of handheld camera work, and in the film Justice League, it's a very locked down looking film. They actually added colors and saturation to this movie to make some things pop in comparison with the previous other films. And I don't think you have to be a genius or that clever to figure it out. I think DC looked at it and said, you know what, audiences really love Marvel films, why don't we lighten this up and please the mass audiences and go more towards that direction? Now, me personally, I love dark, brooding, violent, scary stuff in my comic book movies.
Tell me, do you bleed? You will.
It's lines like that that I love. I love brooding characters who are violent. I don't need happy-go-lucky comic book movies. I want human despair. I want to see anguish. I want to feel depressed at some point during the movie. And that's what makes these comic book movies emotionally connect with me. And when you get rid of all of that, I just feel like I'm watching some sitcom TV show like The Big Bang Theory. And this is just speculation from my head to you guys, but with Joss Whedon coming in, I really feel like his main purpose and goal was to bring levity to this film and also give a sense of camaraderie between the Justice League characters. Because throughout the film, it felt like there were some very obvious reshot scenes just placed in different areas, and those scenes were all character moments with the group talking to each other or giving banter back and forth with comedy moments. And I would assume those are the scenes that he shot. And I can't confirm exactly which scenes were reshot and placed in this film, but throughout the film, and most movies have this, they have a rhythm. And when you're watching a film, there's a rhythm. But in the Justice League, the rhythm kind of stops suddenly, you get something else, and it does feel like it's one of those added in scenes. And once again, that doesn't mean that the added scenes in this film are bad. Sometimes I feel like it really helped the story out, but they do feel oddly placed in the film, and they feel so sudden at times, and then they end abruptly, and then you go somewhere else. Now listen, no spoilers, but I am going to talk about one scene in this film that doesn't ruin anything. It's like saying superheroes fight bad guys. That's essentially what I'm going to say. There's a scene in the Justice League where the entire crew is in jeopardy, pretty much like every comic book movie, and they're dangling on for dear life. And you think, whoa, how are they going to get out of this predicament? What's going to happen? And then all of a sudden, it just cuts, and they're all okay. And you question, what just happened? I thought we were building up to something. Are you going to tell me how they got out of that dangerous situation? But the film never does that. And I can only imagine there was more to it, or I don't know. I don't know what exactly happened there. And that's just one example throughout this film where things suddenly and abruptly end without much explanation, and then it just cuts to something else. Now, let's talk about the best thing in this film, and that is the characters and their development and their camaraderie as a group. Because the Justice League had one job, and that was to truly introduce audiences to the characters of the Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg. Now, I don't want to focus too much on Batman v Superman, but like or hate the movie, I really feel like that email document introducing the characters wasn't necessarily the best way to introduce them to the audience. It was kind of underwhelming in a lot of ways. But in Justice League, it truly explains who these characters are. It gives you their backstory, their character motivations, and it makes you understand them. And it doesn't take a lot of time to do so, but it doesn't feel rushed either. From a character standpoint, I feel like it was the best thing Justice League accomplished, because if you're going to branch out in solo movies like Aquaman or Cyborg or The Flash, now I think people will actually know who these people are. They're going to go see those movies, even though a lot of people aren't seeing the Justice League, because I believe it's the lowest grossing DC film in this universe to date, which is disappointing and weird, isn't it? Like, Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad all made more money opening weekend than the Justice League. First up, you have The Flash, played by Ezra Miller. And at first, Ezra Miller might have seemed like an odd casting choice, but he was great as The Flash. He had likability. He felt like a normal dude with these superpowers. And The Flash, the way that they pulled him off in this film with his powers, I bought into it. You could understand them. He didn't feel overpowered at times, and he really played a great role in the team. My only real criticism with Ezra Miller's performance in this film as Barry Allen, The Flash, was every time that the audience was supposed to laugh at one of his jokes, he would do this. It's like whenever his eyes darted around, that's when you were supposed to laugh at the joke. That was like his version of being awkward in a social setting. And then you have Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa, who's essentially the bass guitarist from Metallica in this film. But yeah, they made Aquaman really cool. They made him badass. He's the king of the sea. And they do explain some things, and they make jokes about Aquaman in this film, or at least Batman does, where he says, "Do you talk to fish?" And he explains, "No, I don't necessarily talk to fish. It's the water and the currents that do the communication." And it's little things like that that I enjoy. I like when they explain made up things that you hear about in the comic book and people make jokes about, but now I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Even though it doesn't really, but for me it does. And booyah, let's talk about the character of Cyborg, who I didn't really know much about from the comic books. And based on the trailers, I will say that his CG looked like shit in those trailers. But in the movie, it looked way better. I bought into it, and I thought Cyborg at times looked phenomenal. And I like throughout the movie, he actually does wear like a sweatpants tracksuit to kind of cover up his armor. And I like little details like that, because he's not just walking around like a naked robot endoskeleton. He's actually like wearing sweatpants. And I was thinking to myself, if I was Cyborg and I had those abilities, I'd probably wear like a hoodie too. And just little details like that I appreciated. But as far as Cyborg's powers and his abilities, they're ever changing, and he doesn't truly understand them. And I also liked that aspect of his character, because it added more depth and dimension to his character. And it's been said a million times over and over, but Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman and Ben Affleck as Batman, two of the most odd casting choices at the time, where people did not agree with these casting choices, and a lot of people hated it, have now become the two best characters in the Justice League, and I can't really see anyone else playing either role anymore. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman was phenomenal. I know someone's going to correct me and say it's pronounced Gal Gadot. I go with Gal Gadot. Please don't correct me if I'm wrong. And then you have the badass bodybuilder buff Ben Affleck. That's what I call him. And once again, he is the backbone of this entire film. He is the guy who's going out and recruiting everyone to bring them together. And Ben Affleck's take on Bruce Wayne and Batman, that is the version, and that is the representation of Batman I've always wanted to see up on the big screen. I love the way that he looks visually. I love his acting style as Bruce Wayne. I really can't ask for a better Batman in these films. But as far as my final thoughts on all the characters go, that was the best thing this movie had going for it. The camaraderie was there. It felt like this group of superheroes put together, interacting with one another, and I bought into it. But there's one character in this film I didn't really buy into or care about, and he was just the generic bad guy known as Steppenwolf, who was there to collect 3 mother boxes and redeem himself and destroy everything. He is the bad guy. And if you watch the extended cut of Batman v Superman, there was a deleted scene introducing Steppenwolf, which, by the way, speaking of deleted and extended and director's cuts, we will definitely have one for Justice League. It'll probably be 2.5 hours long, and it's all the good stuff they cut out to help the movie feel like a real movie. But on Blu-ray, we'll get one of those down the road. They'll make more money on it. But in the meantime, producers thought, you know what? Let's make a 2-hour runtime so we can have more slots during showtimes at the movie theater because more money. Sacrifice quality entertainment for more money. So, yeah, I can't wait for the extended cut of Justice League. Now back to the character Steppenwolf. For me, he just felt like the big generic bad guy, and I really didn't think the character was written that well. Here's one example.
Primitive beings.
How is a guy who uses a battle axe going to call people who use missiles primitive beings? Now let's talk about the CG and the visual effects of Justice League. This is a big epic comic book movie. We know that they're going to use CG, green screens, all the effects they possibly can to bring the story to the big screen. And when it comes to effects, I always prefer practical effects, but I also prefer good looking CG. And in this film, there's some unpolished or slightly not believable CG at many times. And it's not even so much the big epic spectacular things that you expect them to CG, like space battles and 8-foot tall villains. That's not the stuff I'm talking about. There are some very off-putting green screen background effects going on throughout this film. And it's scenery where you could just go to a park and film it. You don't need green screen. You could just go outside somewhere, find a location, and shoot these things. But yet, when you have these characters and there's just buildings and a park in the background with some grass, it looks like they're just standing in front of a green screen with softbox lights pointed at them. And for lack of a better example, it reminded me of the film The Room at times. Oh, hi, Batman! And by the way, please, if some of my criticisms about the lackluster CG effects throughout this film trigger you, please keep this in mind. There's no reason or excuse for a movie that cost nearly $300 million to look bad at all. The film The Justice League should be one of the most spectacular CG achievements of all time. There's no excuse not to be. Now, before I give you my final thoughts on this film, there's one other aspect I want to talk about, and that's the musical score for this film. Once again, you have Danny Elfman, who worked on 1989 Batman and 1992 Batman, returning once again, and there are some tones throughout this film where it sounds like that 89 Batman theme, and it got me excited. It got the little dinglies hard. And Danny Elfman's a great, talented, amazing composer. I prefer the Hans Zimmer themes to some of these characters, especially Batman, for example, or Man of Steel. I really thought the Man of Steel theme could have been introduced throughout this movie at some points, but they don't use it anywhere, and that was a little bit disappointing. But just on a quick side note, I did enjoy the soundtrack by Danny Elfman for this film, and after watching the film, it was midnight, I was driving home, I had a 2-hour drive home from the screening of this. I stopped at Walmart to buy the CD to listen to. Yes, I still buy CDs. They were sold out, so I went to Target, they were sold out. So that doesn't relate to anything, but I just wanted to share that with you. Now, here are my final flicking thoughts on the Justice League. Throughout this film, there's a lot of fan service given to audiences. You see the Justice League fighting side by side, kicking ass. And all the action sequences in this film are serviceable to the story. I wasn't let down, I was entertained. And I hate to use the term fun when I describe movies, but it almost feels like DC took all the past criticisms for their other films that were too dark and bleak. And is that a negative or a positive? Like I said, I like the dark, bleak stuff, but at times it is nice to see these characters having fun. It is nice to laugh at the movie every once in a while and not hate your life. And there is a lot of jokes throughout this film, especially from Batman. There's one scene with Batman where he says one funny thing that relates to something he said in Batman v Superman. And it definitely felt like it was reshot and just placed in there, but it's a funny scene and people laughed. And the one last thing I wanted to talk about with the Justice League is there is one subplot with a character in this film, and I was truly expecting more from that storyline than what I got. It felt like, oh, here you guys go, and then boop, it's over, and then everything just goes on. Ugh, I'm almost scared to give you guys my grade for this movie because nowadays on YouTube, if you don't give a movie an A+, that means you hated the movie. But I can say I did not hate Justice League. I enjoyed it. It was a little bit better than I expected it to be. And I really did think they did a great job at introducing these characters as a team and it made me excited to see them in their own solo movies. I just really thought they could have tightened up the script and gave an overall better story to flesh everything out. But with that said, I'm going to give the Justice League a B- for Booyah Batman. Yeah, we'll go with that. I feel like the Justice League got the important things right, and that is the characters. As far as the script and the villain, it's a little bit messy and underwhelming at times, but it is an entertaining movie, and I want to watch it again. I would probably buy the Blu-ray and watch it multiple times. Alright guys, that's my take on the movie The Justice League. Now here's my question for you, and let me know down below. What did you think about the Justice League, and what do you want to see go down in the next Justice League movie? And like I said, there's a lot of things I want to talk about in detail, but I will cover those in a spoiler review coming very soon, so look out for that. And once again, if you guys like movies or TV shows and you want to see my first reactions, or you want to post your own reactions, or watch other people's, definitely check out the app Stardust. I'll put the link down below. The app is completely free to download, and when it comes to social media, there's a lot of crap out there where people take pictures of food or little kittens. There's none of that. It's dedicated to nothing but movies and TV shows. By the way, I do like kittens, but I want a place where I can just talk about movies. It's super simple and easy to use. You just whip your phone out, talk for 30 seconds or less. It's where I post my quick thoughts on new or old movies that I never get a chance to talk about on YouTube. So like I said, link down below to Stardust. I love it. Check it out, and definitely follow me, The Flick Pick, on Stardust. And before I go, if you haven't already, please subscribe. That way I can see you next time.